we want the shows to be spectacular and we want the energy to be there nonstop. So if you come to a Megadeth show, there's not many pauses.
Ghost Club Magazine welcomes in Dirk Verbeuren of Megadeth. Dirk, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Omar. Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
Hey, man, thanks for being available, man. I appreciate you taking the time out to chat with me and us. So the new Megadeth record, The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead. You've been in the band about 8 years now.
Not quite.
Almost
6.5.
Six and a half years. Yeah, it just feels like it's been forever. Because I remember I saw like the third show you did at that weird festival in somewhere in New York.
Yes.
Yeah. So like I wanted to start at the beginning. Like I believe it was Chris Adler who kind of put you on the Megadeth radar.
It was a bunch of people, it was actually, when Dave was looking for somebody, like I've seen him do that too since then, because sometimes we have a crew member leave or whatever. He'll ask everybody around him, like band, crew, management, anybody he trusts that knows a little bit about the music industry, like, hey, make a list, give me some recommendations if there's anyone you think would fit this job description and would work well with us, So I had met Kiko before, so he had recommended me because he was a Soilwork fan. He actually came to see us play in Finland some years prior. So him and I had been in touch. And then I was good friends with Tony Laureano, who was the drum tech at the time, because we had toured together many years before and stayed in touch. So there were a whole bunch of different people who Dave talked to, and a bunch of them had said Dirk, and I think that's kind of where it started. I know they looked at some videos together with management, and I guess he saw me do the deconstruction with Devin Townsend in the studio. There's a video I put up of that. And I guess, after that, they reached out to me, and I spoke to Dave on the phone, and that was pretty much my audition, was the 5 minutes on the phone.
Oh, right on. So what was the first song you got to play with the band?
The first song, well, I'm going to guess probably Hangar 18, because that's been the show opener, traditionally. And I believe when we went to rehearsal, I think that was probably one of the first ones we played. I don't remember exactly, actually. I do know that we just did the one rehearsal prior to the first show, which was a few shows prior to, the one you mentioned. It was Columbus Rock on the Range Festival. That was the first one. And so the day prior to that, we rehearsed and we jammed, and it went really well. It was smooth. I had some time to prepare and learn the set. So I came in feeling, obviously some tension because it's a big gig, but I was pretty confident, and yeah, it was very easy. They were very welcoming to me and made me feel at ease, both the band and the crew. Dave was super cool too. And here we are, man.
Yeah, that's great, man. Like I also like the fact that like you're just like such a professional that like you could have just said, bye, Soilwork, I'm gone, like not even leave him hanging. Like you didn't leave him hanging. I appreciate the fact that you're one of your students, Bastian, was able to step up and like fill in the gap. He's like, hey, I'm going to leave you guys completely. Good luck. You didn't do that. That's really good.
Yeah, I mean, we're friends. The Soilwork guys were super supportive throughout this process, and they encouraged me. And when the offer came not too long after we hit the road to join the band, they said, of course you should do it. It's a gig of a lifetime. Go for it. And but so of course I absolutely, like you mentioned, I did not want to leave them hanging. And the good thing is that I had a few people that I knew who were Soilwork fans and were capable and would be available. Bastian was one of them, and he ended up getting the gig. It ended up working out with him, and it's awesome to see now, for example, with the new Soilwork album, how much he's brought to the band. He's really found his place in there. He's an amazing drummer, and he's only getting better, as he spends time with the guys. And yeah, I'm just happy because I want to see that band get more recognition. It was something I was already fighting for when I was in the band, and I think they're just so underrated.
Agreed. It's like they put out some banger records before you even joined the band, and yes, your involvement kind of like made more people take notice. Like I felt like oh, wait a minute, what's going on over here? Like what's he playing? And people just like love that stuff, man. Like drumming is sometimes like good drumming and bad drumming. Like you hear like, all right, this is okay, and then there's some people that bring a little extra. And again, now that you're in Megadeth, like you come with them a line, like you have a nice long line of drummers before you, and you fit right in. I was nervous when I was like, oh man, because yeah, because like this new record kind of for me, it feels sonically like there's a just some of the energy of the feeling of some of the early like the Gar records. Like it kind of has that kind of like little energy, but it has like the more modern production of the obviously the modern production of the later day records, and it's like yeah, there's some of that mid tempo stuff in there, but it's not too mid tempo. It's like you're just right at the edge of like this is gonna like go crazy any second. I really enjoy that about it because that was I was like, oh man, it's gonna be all mid tempo. I was like, is Dirk gonna be able to do Dirk? That was a big question. Like everybody we were talking about, it was like, is Dirk gonna like? I don't expect to hear like blast beats on a Megadeth record. You know, it's like, but I expect it to be thrashy as hell with you in it.
Yeah, I definitely I wanted to bring that, of course, and because that was my era, kind of that I grew up with was P Cells, rest in peace. Like those records were big for me growing up, and Dave has a nice way of describing it. He said with Gar, it felt like there was an element of danger. It was always kind of teetering on the abyss, but not quite falling in. Because he was always had this crazy playing style. He was always pushing stuff. So, and I love that. I mean, it's always that energy is something that always spoke to me in this kind of extreme metal. Whether it's people like Lombardo, Gar, they have this element of just fire and just pure power behind the kit that you can't really explain other than when you hear it, you feel it. And I don't know how successful I was in bringing that, but it was definitely my goal to have that, because to me that's part of the DNA of Megadeth. Even though throughout the years, like you said, the production got a bit more modern, and that's only normal as techniques get better, and bands have more time to spend on their records, and they get better at what they do and work with better producers. So that's a part of it, of course, too. But the music itself and the way it's interpreted, that's what makes people react to it, right? So for me, I really try to just bring that enthusiasm and the energy, just like I bring it live. I try to bring that same thing in the studio, and to that effect, I try to do full takes of the songs as much as possible. I didn't want to do like a piece by piece thing. We did a lot of piecing things together for the demos when we were writing the songs, of course, because that's more, a common thing to do as you're working things out. But then once we had kind of the song structures together, I just wanted to, pretend like I was playing a show basically, and just go for it, and have that vibe. You know what I mean? It's hard to put into words.
Yeah, yeah. There's a certain energy that really is hard for, especially a drummer to replicate. Like, all right, I'm going to take half of this version and half of this version. It could be meshed well, but sometimes if you could just go through it, maybe a little, sometimes you gotta let those little tweaks, those little like little flubs or whatever that just seek through live in there, because it together sounds better than the version that you kind of chop together, just has a better feeling.
Absolutely. You're so spot on, man. I couldn't agree more. I think the whole perfection thing is also something that came over the years with people using, more modern recording techniques with Pro Tools and all that, which makes it really easy to make everything sound perfect. But I think people need to remember that what makes, for example, a band like Led Zeppelin so good is how they played together. It wasn't about perfection. It was about the interaction between the four guys. And were there some tempo modifications and stuff? Yeah. Did it sometimes accelerate a bit and pull back a little bit? Yeah, but that's part of what makes the music live. So when you're too stuck to the grid and just being like, this song is 174 and it's not going to budge from there, you're kind of taking away potentially some of the life that the song has inherently that you would get if you play well together as a band. And that's kind of always in the back of my mind. Whenever there's room to bring some of that in, I want to bring that in. With Megadeth, we do play to a click, also live, because we have video screens. So there's a lot that's tied in with each song that necessitates us to use a click. But at the same time, our clicks aren't static. A lot of our clicks move up and down, and there's actually quite a bit of work that goes into that. Also, because some songs in the studio, it's one tempo, and then when you play them live, you find out that a different tempo is better. So there's a lot of us trying out different things like that when we do sound checks and when we do pre-tour rehearsals to try and find the sweet spot, and like, where is it good? And we'll try it live, and then maybe the next day we'll be like, it needs to go up like 4 ppm, and it's subtle things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily notice that much, but to us, that's what feels right.
And it all like syncs up once you figure out that you get all that synced up, you got to deal with the lights and the video. So even though if you're going a little bit faster, then something's got to be adjusted here on both of those ends.
Yes,
those are
that's also why we, you know, people will tell us like, why aren't you playing this song and that song sometimes? Because obviously we have over 200 songs to choose from. It's a vast catalog, but that's one of the reasons is that, you know, it's once we commit to putting a song in the set, there's a lot that goes with that. There needs to be a video. It needs to be, you know, the guy that makes those videos, puts them together, needs to work on the possible adjustments that we're going to go through at sound check and stuff when we decide on the tempos. And, you know, maybe some songs have different little arrangements we do live compared to the studio version where some parts become longer or additional parts happen or things like that. So it's a lot, you know, so it's not super easy to just go like, hey, let's play this tonight. We don't really have the kind of configuration, unfortunately, that allows us to do that, but it's a small price to pay, I feel, when you get the kind of show that we bring, you know, because it's a nice, big, awesome show. Like, you know, you walk away from that and you've experienced something. That's our goal, you know, and of course the videos, the lights, all that comes into it, and also just our own, you know, energy. Like every night for me, it's 100%. You know, I want every person that's there that bought a ticket to come and see us to have the time of their life.
Yeah, and it's like I do appreciate that the set lists have evolved since you've been there, because for a while, like I felt like when I saw you guys in the last bunch of years, it was like I felt like, all right, it's been kind of like I've heard these songs. It's like just like 200 more songs that you just like switch it around. You know, it's like you know, like there's songs in there like I know I'll never hear again, just because maybe because it just dates personal beliefs on the songs anymore. Like my first song was "Go to Hell," and like I saw them play that like back in the day, you know. So like the early, like Megadeth was like one of my first bands. Like the Bill and Ted Bogus Journey soundtrack is where my first experience of them were. So I have those kind of songs, like that song and 99 Ways to Die. Like those are the songs like that are more like part of my like my metal like roots.
We are playing Angry Again right now. We've brought that to the set, which is also on the Hidden Treasures, also a soundtrack song.
Last Action Hero.
Yeah, exactly.
Last Action Hero, like that was.
So we do switch it up, man. And it's true, you know. Of course, people have their favorites and the ones that they connected with. A song like 99 Ways to Die, unfortunately, it's like Dave can't sing that high, you know, and he'll be the first person to say it. Like after everything he went through with his neck, and recently his cancer, it's his voice has changed. You know, I think he's found a really good place now. You can hear that on the new album. He's found kind of a new voice, you know, after going through all that, and I think he's actually singing way stronger now than he was when I first started playing with the band 6 years ago. So it's not a bad place. There's just certain notes that, you know, certain heights of notes that he can't sing like that anymore, you know, and we can put a few songs like that in the set, like older songs that where he can pull it off. But if we have too many of those, you know, it's just going to strain his voice to the point where it's going to be a problem for subsequent shows. And that's just the reality we kind of all have to accept too, you know. So some songs are kind of like, it's not going to happen. But then again, there's so many cool things. Like we're playing Dread and the Fugitive Mind right now, which hasn't been played for a really long time. That's a great song, fun. You know, Jimmy DeGrasso on drums, like killer stuff.
Yeah, he put out, he was a banger. His record was a banger.
Man. Yeah.
The World Needs a Hero with some great stuff. I would love to hear Hangar 18, the Return to the Hangar. I would love to hear that again, because I've heard them together. I've heard they do deserve that deserves a comeback. I feel like it just bookends that song, and it's a great sequel. Not a lot of sequel songs are good, but that's a damn good one.
I agree, man. Maybe I'll put that on the table next time we talk about set lists.
So you mentioned about you guys did demos. Did you guys jam together? Or I mean, I'm guessing this was pretty much mostly written in the before times.
Yeah, the before times. I love how we have to call them that. Yeah. So in 2019 is pretty much when we really started. You know, we the first step was selecting riffs, because Dave has a massive vault of riffs going all the way back to his early days. You know, everything is being cataloged and recorded and put into folders. So it's pretty impressive to hear some of the stuff like, oh, wow, there's a riff from probably like 85, you know, that he hasn't used. So there's a lot of cool stuff, because he'll just be somewhere and have an idea and record it on his phone or whatever. And then, you know, we'll put all that aside, right? So the first step was that. So me and Kiko went to his house a few times and just worked on some basic things. Like there'd be a bunch of riffs, and I just put some different drum ideas over each riff to have kind of an idea of what we could do. Then once we went through that phase, from about May to July 2019, the four of us, because David was still in the band at the time, we went together to a house next to Dave's house in Nashville, which he rented out. It was like a house that you could rent on Airbnb or something. And we stayed there.
Nice.
And basically for 3 months, all we did was work on the songs. So jamming, piecing things together, just whatever, coming up with new ideas, taking some of the ideas we'd worked on previously and structuring them. And so Dave would show up, almost every single day. I mean, I think we took like some days off usually, but most of that, 6 out of 7 days of the week, he'd be there and we'd be doing that. It was very inspirational and fun. And then throughout that is when his cancer treatment started, because he had found out, about the throat cancer. And man, like even that didn't stop him from showing up almost every single day. He'd go to the hospital in the morning, get his chemo or his radiation, and a few hours later he'd be there. He'd do some work in the morning and then he'd show up and boom, there we go. Let's keep working. So some days he was pretty tired, but he was always there, so dedicated to like the band and making this album as good as he could make it. And we got to a point where he needed some rest. So we decided to, okay, instead of going from this straight to the studio, which was kind of the initial plan, and then we had some shows lined up, it became apparent that like he needs some recovery time where he can just kind of focus on that. So we took a break, went on the road in early 2020 in Europe. And then just as we came home from that is when everything happened. The pandemic hit, everything got shut down. All plans were kind of dead in the water at that point, unfortunately. A difficult time for everybody. So yeah, that's how it happened. But so during that period of time, to go back to what you were saying, like that's when we pretty much established like the baseline for what became the record. All the song structures roughly, of course some things still changed after, but yeah, those 3 months were very important.
Before you went into the studio, was everything already like, these are our songs, we're going in there, nothing extra, or like, hey, let's just see if we can just freestyle one at the moment?
There's one that we wrote pretty much as we were going into the studio. So this would have been May 2020 at this point. So now we're in the pandemic, and I actually drove from LA to Nashville because it was the beginning of everything. And
I wasn't
sure how safe flying was at that point. So I was like, oh, screw it, I'll rent a car and make it a road trip. So I did that, like mask on everywhere. Hotels are like completely dead. Like there's no food anywhere. Like it was weird, but that's what I decided to do. So I made it a fun trip anyway. And so one song kind of came together right there, in the days leading up to the studio and as I started recording, but we didn't end up finishing that song. There's a few songs we had that didn't end up getting completed because along the way, we didn't feel like they fit with the rest or whatever. So those are still on the hard disks. We might revisit those ideas in the past, but the songs that ended up on the album outside of the two covers, those were all pretty much, demoed out to a certain extent, some more than others, in 2019. The covers came along kind of on the spot. We had talked about it. Dave had said he'd like to do a few covers, but the decision of the songs pretty much happened in the studio. It was like, I'd be rooting for Police Truck because, like Dave, I'm a big Dead Kennedys fan, so I had been pushing for that one. The Sammy Hagar cover, that was like spur of the moment. I think Dave used to play that song with his old band Panic, the pre-Metallica band that he had. And so that was just kind of like, hey, why don't we do that one? And it kind of felt like of the time as well with everything that was going on. So yeah, I just sat down and listened to it and wrote down the drum parts and recorded it.
Those two songs do definitely have a totally different feel from the rest of the record. It still fits in the same. It still fits in there, but it's like, oh, we're ending it on like a brighter, lighter note. Yeah. I felt, because they both just felt more fun. The other songs, you could say everything was more serious. Like, I'm not smiling. We're just gonna be like, we're serious here. And these last two songs are like, hey, let's just kick back and like, let's just have fun. And then you can hear it in those songs.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty much bonus tracks, so I don't think we would consider them as being like integral part of the story of the record,
Yeah.
Even though I will say that there's some funny stuff in the album too, like for example, the Hello Moon Man part in Mission to Mars, there's a few moments like that in the album where Dave's having fun too, or like the drunk guy and Junkie, that's kind of mumbling, who was actually our groundskeeper at the house that we stayed, that we became friends with, and we had him come in and record that part. So there was the typical tongue-in-cheek stuff that you'd expect from Dave. It's definitely there too if you look for it.
Yeah, the end of Mission to Mars, that last minute and a half or so, I was like, that's really it's like I wanted that riff to just go on a lot longer. It's like I really love that riff. I was like, this riff is just awesome.
But that's why you'll listen to it again. You know, we make
Yeah.
it just short enough that you're like, I want to hear that song again.
Yeah, it's like one of those songs, man. It's like, oh man, it's like, but you know, if you made it longer, it wouldn't be as effective. And it's just like
Right.
you just want to, but you can't.
Yeah, exactly.
So everything started, the recording process started in 2020.
Yeah.
And then obviously what happened, and you had to re-record bass tracks. Did Steve DiGiorgio bring anything extra to the parts, or did he just kind of just here's what David wrote, play what David wrote?
For the most part, I would say that's what he did, you know, because at that point the bass parts were pretty much laid out. And so there's a few things that he changed and a few things that he added, like for example, in Night Stalkers, in that bass part, you know, once the guitars come in after the bass break and he does those slides that are very Steve DiGiorgio sounding, you know, I think that's some stuff he added. I don't remember exactly because you know, when David had recorded his parts after that, I only sporadically heard like the work in progress because I kind of decided to, you know, I didn't want to keep over listening to it. At that point, we had already worked on the songs a lot and then recorded them. And so for me, like while the guys were doing their stuff, my step was like, I'll take a break from this so I can have kind of a fresh take on how it sounds once it starts really coming together. So throughout 2020, before all this happened, you know, I didn't listen that much to the record. 2021, same thing. You know, the pandemic was still going, and we realized we're not really going to be able to put this out now because we can't fully do a full world tour to support it. We did tour in the summer of 2021, but it was under kind of strange conditions, you know.
Yeah.
Great tour, but
yeah, I saw you there. Yeah.
So we decided. So I kind of stayed away from it. So I don't really remember exactly like everything how David played it, but I do know that Steve kind of went in with the intention of bringing that typical sound to the band because David's, you know, sound was very integral to Megadeth sounds too. He played on most of the records, was there from the beginning. So it's kind of like the same thing I did on drums, you know, where I did want there to be a clear element of like how Menza played and how Gar played and kind of those iconic guys that helped build Megadeth to where it is today. You know, I wanted people to have that feeling when they listen to the songs. And Steve did the same thing as far as I know. So he didn't stray super far. He didn't go like all fretless bass like how you would do maybe in Death or Testament or some of his other bands.
Yeah. It depends on what tour it is. You'll see him with a different type of bass. Like I saw him on a Testament tour years ago, and he had like a 3-string bass, and I was like a fretless 3-string, and I was like, I don't even know what I'm looking at right now. You know, I was like, if you had to call somebody in, I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, man, he's incredible, man, incredible musician, and it's really cool to have him on the album.
It's really nice to see James back in the band because like I was a big fan of Sleepwalker. His bass tracks on that song are just killer. You know, it's like
yes, like, absolutely.
You know, that's another song I would come back.
Yeah, it's cool, man. He you know, he just fit right back in. You know, when Dave decided to call him because obviously Steve is busy with Testament and stuff, and when Dave decided to call to help us out on the tour we did in 2021, which was the metal tour of the year. James showed up and actually him and I were a little bit early at the first rehearsal. And so we decided, hey, you know, while we wait for the guys, why don't we run through some of the songs? You know, we're here anyway. And man, it clicked right away. Like we played some of the stuff and we were just like, he was gluing to my kick drums like we'd always played together. He's such a professional and such a nice guy. And he just really brings a lot of positive energy to the band and also great stage energy. I'll say that. Like when you watch James on stage, you know, he's having a blast and he's going for it. And that's so cool because, you know, that's the only way I envision playing shows is like, if you're going to go up on stage, like give it your all, you know, whether you're tired or maybe feeling a little sick or not, or whatever, like it doesn't matter. Like for that hour and a half, just give it everything you got. Like I said, make sure people have the time of their life. If not, what's the point? You know, right? Like if you're going to do it, you know?
I hear you, man. Like one of my old bands, we would take the stage. We're like, yeah, like, we're playing with friends of ours. And it's like, oh man, they played great. And like, we would always be like, yeah, we don't have friends on stage. When we hit the stage, we don't have any friends. We're there just to like, oh, we love you guys. But right now we're here to destroy you guys. Exactly. And it's like, yeah. And it's like, if you were in our band, if you just played guitar, we had one guitar player that just kind of didn't move. And it's like, you got to move, bro. You gotta know your parts a little bit better and get more comfortable. And like, cause you're standing there and no one's going to just, I'm gonna look at this side of the stage. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
you want everybody. You want to be able to look at everybody in the band and be like, damn, these guys are giving it their all.
Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more. We spent quite a lot of time on that. It's something that Dave also holds very close to his heart. We want the shows to be spectacular and we want the energy to be there nonstop. So if you come to a Megadeth show, there's not many pauses. Like every now and then, some nights he'll speak a bit more than others, but in general, we just go from song to song and we just hammer them home. And so it takes a lot of stamina and a lot of energy, and we really have to kind of figure out what we're doing at which times. And you develop that over time, so it's a constant evolution as well. But I will say that it's really inspiring to see how much energy and passion Dave still has for that after all the years that he's been doing this band. You wouldn't blame a guy for being a little bit like, all right, I've been doing this for 40 years or so, like it's about time that I slow down. There's no slowing down in Dave, man. Like, I mean, I guess if you listen to the new album, you can hear that too, because there's some of the heaviest and fastest songs Megadeth's ever done, and that's incredible. Like, I can't believe it. Very inspiring.
Yeah, like I just think back when you just said earlier about he's got like the bag of riffs, and I remember like listening to interviews him talking about like, yeah, he's got these riffs. He's like, I don't touch my guitar unless I'm recording, and like
Yeah,
I've always remembered that. Like how many years ago, it was like if we're going to rehearsal, it's like, dude, somebody's got to be recording something because we're gonna lose something. And sure
right,
enough, you lose something. Like, what do we do? It's like I have no idea. That was really good. The air, it was there for a minute, and we didn't capture it even on a little crappy recorder. It was like we don't have it, it's gone. Like it went through us and we didn't grab it at the time.
right,
And
right.
for him to
Yeah, those
have all
moments
these
are
riffs,
frustrating.
yeah, for him to have all those riffs, it just reminds me a little bit of Prince, because they said like, oh yeah, Prince has like a vault of all these. He had a vault of all these riffs and albums and music done. It's like I'm figuring like Dave's probably like the metal version of Prince with the amount of riffs he's got stockpiled that he
Yeah.
could just like sell you a riff. He's like, yeah, I'll sell you this. I'm not using this right after. Here's like,
That's funny. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like that. I mean, that's the thing. Like, music can come to you in moments when you don't expect it. It's cool when it's in rehearsal and you're already like there and you can record. Nowadays, especially, it's easy. But sometimes you'll have a riff idea in the middle of the night. You'll wake up and you'll just hear a thing, and then that's the time when you gotta like grab your phone and just hum it like, whatever. I've done
yep,
that. Because sometimes that turns out to be like a killer riff. Sometimes not. Sometimes you listen back the next day, you're like, what the hell was I thinking? But but it's funny because yeah, he's learned to really just be methodical with that and let no idea go to waste. So it's cool because it's a great starting point to have all those different ideas that he has and just use those as like, okay, this is let's see if this can take us somewhere. Like I said, sometimes we just more or less Lego things together. Other times we just jam. Like, I remember Celebutant was one of those songs that was more jam based. We had some riffs that went well together that Chris Rakestraw, the co-producer, had kind of selected together with Dave out of his vault, and Chris thought, I think these three will go really well together. And then we just kind of started jamming on those, and then from there the rest of the song was born, just from kind of feeling the feeling of those riffs and seeing what else that would inspire us. So a very organic process. And I think, in my opinion, you can hear that in the song. It's a very old school kind of, classic heavy metal track with, maybe some touches of Motorhead and obviously, Dave's personality woven into it. Pretty cool.
yeah. The Megadeth is a band that's really like you can't really cover Megadeth a lot of times and give it the justice without having the attitude behind it. Some people
Yeah.
do a lot of songs that are very, like, oh yeah, peace sells, you whatever. Like you can do certain songs nice and straightforward, but there's a lot of songs from Megadeth. It's like there's an attitude behind everything, and if you don't have that, at least not if not a physical snarl, we gotta have that little mental lip snarl when you're playing it. You're missing it.
Yeah, man, I make so many, people always say like, oh, you smile so much on stage and stuff like that. I guess I do, but there's also a lot of times like when we play a song like Peace Sells, for example, I'm like, making like a metal face, like,
Yeah.
clenching my teeth and just like, because I'm so into it, and I'm just with the lyrics and just the whole vibe of the song, I'm just feeling it. I'm just like, like Dave's kind of attitude, like you said, it kind of flows through me. And so that's how I want to hit the drums.
I know since you play guitar, did any of your riffs make it into this?
Yes, so I have Night Stalkers has a riff that I wrote, which is the riff that comes after the Ice-T section.
Okay.
And yeah, that's one that I just kind of randomly came up with that one day on Dave's playing V. I was just messing around, and everybody liked that riff, so it ended up there. And then besides that one, the song "Life in Hell" is I wrote a demo that I brought to Dave, and you know, it was one of a few. I had made a few, and he liked that one. And so at some point in the 3 months in 2019, he picked that song and started kind of jamming on it, and started, you know, making the guitarist cooler, because of course he's a way cooler guitar player than I am, and way better. But you know, so he started kind of putting the Dave Mustaine touch on it, and you know, I would say like kind of the rough blueprint of the structure was there, and like the drum fill that's in the beginning and the end of the song, that was all there. But then he really improved it, you know. So we worked together a little bit on it like that, and ended up being "Life in Hell," which is a cool song. It has like that old school kind of, you know, chugging like feeling from the thrash metal from the early days, and the like the tempo break in the middle that I really like, which is an idea I had. Like, I want to bring something like that where it just abruptly changes tempo and then goes back to the beginning tempo. So, you know, that's really cool to see that kind of take shape and end up on the record. I'm really proud of that one.
I think those are some great songs, man. It's like, and then I was like, yeah, like even like with more like My Stalkers, it's cool. It's like, oh, it felt like, in a way, it's like, oh, wait a minute, like Dave was on like the Body Count record like 2 records ago, and now it's like I'm returning the favor, you know. And it felt like it's really cool. I was like, the choice of guest people on here. I guess Ice-T is the only one officially, but again, the version I had the Sammy Hagar and the Dead Kennedys cover. So it's like that was it's a very interesting mix of people, and I think they all fit great. They were great choices to have as additions.
Good to hear. Thank you, man. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, Ice-T, it's amazing because I grew up listening to his music. You know, I listened to a lot of rap and hip hop in the mid '80s. You know, all those bands back then inspired me a lot. Run DMC, Public Enemy, Beastie Boys, Ice-T, you know, LL Cool J, and so on. You know, that was big in my discography. So for me, there's certainly no shock. You know, I still listen to hip hop on the regular, so it's part of my DNA. But I know for some metal fans, like, they're like radically against anything that touches on that culture. And I think it's really cool that Dave just doesn't give a damn about that. You know, he's like, dude, Ice-T is a legend. Like, he's like the longest running actor on a US TV series. You know, the guy has really made a name for himself and made a career for himself that's like beyond anything you could believe for someone who grew up the way he did in you know, in a bad place, etc. Like, look at the guy, you know. And plus, he's super cool. Like, we got to meet him a few years ago. He came to one of our shows, and he's a super smart, super cool dude. It's very obvious when you meet him. And so, you know, I think it's great, man. Every time I hear that part and I hear his voice, like, I get excited, you know.
and he's a vet too. Yes. On top of that, people forget that Ice-T was like in the military at one point.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. He fought to defend our country, and you know, I mean, you can't not respect the guy. I'm not saying you have to be a fan of the style of music that he does, because, you know, everybody likes what they like and doesn't like what they don't like. That's fine. But as far as like his legitimacy, like, I think it's indisputable, you know.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your drum kit a little bit. When did you decide to start doing this drumhead art?
I think in the last 2 years that I was in Slow Work, I had kind of started doing that, you know, and because I was just, I guess, bored on tour, and I was like, oh, let me try and draw a logo on this and see. And then, you know, that became a thing. So now with Megadeth, I try and crank out a few every day if I can. Some days it's harder than others, but I look at it as a twofold thing. It's a good thing for me to kind of fulfill one of my other creative passions I've always drawn since I was a kid. And I'm not like a great graphic artist or anything like that, like the real good people you see, but I just, you know, I like band logos. I like, you know, the metal graphics and things. So it's a fun way to do it. I usually use the t-shirts and stuff. I put them underneath the head and then draw over them. So I do a lot of tracing, and then I kind of flesh it out in my own vibe, you know. But the other cool thing about it too is that now all those heads that would otherwise end up in the garbage are now being used for something cool. They'll end up a piece of art on a Megadeth fan's wall, which I think is great, because, you know, we go through quite a lot of drum heads in a tour. Unfortunately, you know, as great as they are, like, you know, with the beating they get, they can only do so many shows before they need to be replaced. And so for me, I see that as a huge benefit, you know. Instead of going to the landfill and contributing to the immense problem of pollution we're facing with in this planet, and the plastic that's in the oceans and all that stuff, all that horrible stuff, now at least, they're going to go somewhere and people are going to cherish them and they kind of have a second life. So I really like that about it.
Yeah, and it kind of ties into your Savage Lands organization.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I saw like you and your old bandmate from before Scarve. Yeah. You guys decided to come together with this initiative. Like, and now that you have the bigger name behind you, I guess it helps that it's like, oh, Megadeth. It's like, oh, Megadeth is caring about the world.
Yeah,
it's kind of a cool thing to have out there.
It's super cool, man. I'm extremely proud of it. Dave had done his thing where he was part of establishing soup kitchens in Haiti, and so obviously there's the album Countdown to Extinction, where he showed how much he cares about the planet and nature. And so for me, having this opportunity with Sylvain, to who indeed was a bandmate of mine many years ago, and always been an ecologist and an activist as well, to do something with him and to kind of give his organization a face and some weight in the metal community is really, really something I put a lot of pride in and a lot of effort into, because the way I look at it, like, a lot of people are kind of like have this hopeless feeling about the world, where it's like there's nothing I can do as an individual. Like, look what I'm up against, like these corporations and the politicians and like those guys, the banks, they decide everything. What am I going to do? And I'm familiar with that feeling because I've felt it many times. The truth is, if we don't all start doing something, nothing's going to change. Like in the end, as with a lot of things, it has to come from the people, and small things can make a difference. I'll give you an example. Like it's going to sound very silly maybe, but when we're on tour, I drink about 2, 3, 4 coffees a day. So a few years ago, I bought this mug and I just carry it around with me, and I've had this habit now of like when I leave the tour bus to go to our dressing room and we have the catering area and stuff, I always bring my mug with me. So, and how many like coffee cups I saved like on a tour? Probably like hundreds, and of course, in the scheme of things, what is that? Nothing at all. But and it's just kind of irrelevant maybe in a way, but to me it's more of a symbolic thing of like, look, if you put in a little bit of thought and effort, you can try and bring some positive. And that's the same with Savage Lands. We're trying to preserve to sum it up briefly, we're trying to preserve and sanctuarize some land that's under threat from basically real estate development. Costa Rica is a very small country. Sylvain has lived there now for, I believe, 17 years. And the reason why he decided to tackle that is because there's already a groundswell of the local population to kind of be against all the stuff that's happening. And also because it's something that's actually doable. We're not up against, let's say, Brazil and Bolsonaro, who's like decimating the Amazon. You can't really stop that, not to discredit what Gojira are doing there with Amazonia, because it's wonderful, but it's very hard to go up against those powers. Costa Rica, it's a lot more of a local thing where, let's say, some wealthy guys will come in and they want to build a house, and so they buy a parcel of land and they cut down all the trees. Truth is, you can buy a parcel of land, you can put your house, you can have your yard, and then you can keep the rest of your land wild so that it's kept up. Like our organization and the local people will go in there and help you do all that and how to do that right and how to keep it nice so that the monkeys and other species that live there still have enough land so they can survive. Because if you just cut it all down, then those species will disappear, and at the end of the day, Costa Rica loses, right? Because one of the reasons people want to go there is because of all those things. So that's to sum it up. Like we want to either help those people to do it in the best possible way, and also for some of the lands, just sanctuarize them so that they can be built on. And that's what Savage Lands does. We're getting a lot of people from the music scene involved. And the best way, if you do want to support that, is go to the website, savagelands.org. There's a lottery that we're doing where you can win some really cool one-of-a-kind guitars made with fallen wood from trees from Costa Rica, played and signed by some super cool guys like Andreas. Kiko, guys from Gojira, et cetera. And there's also going to be a donation that you can make as well. We're still working on getting that set up, but that'll be up very soon. And we're going to do all kinds of actions. There's a lot that's going to be tied into it. You'll hear more about Savage Lands in the coming years for sure. And thank you for bringing it up. I appreciate it, Omar.
No problem, man. It's very rare. You see bands that are, not up their own asses, for a better word. It's like, oh, we're just a band. We don't have anything but being a band. But then again, like I grew up in the 90s. So it's like, you had more, everybody's political-ish or has some kind of, cause. Like, I remember Rage Against the Machine brought the whole Tibetan freedom concerts around back in my youth, and like when I saw like the first time I saw Megadeth was they were doing a canned food drive for the homeless. So if you like brought like a certain amount of cans, like 20 pounds or whatever, you bought a bunch of cans, you get like an after show meet and greet. So it's like people who care, have always been around in a lot of bands. Not everybody's all dark and brooding all the time. You have people that actually have, like, oh, there's a little bit more substance to you and your band because you care about something besides yourself. It's more selfless, I guess is the right word to say it.
Yeah, that's great that you bring that up. For me, that's so important personally, because there's always been kind of a part of me that felt like, as much as what I do has substance in the sense that when we play shows and we release records and they make people happy and they allow people to escape a little bit or make their life a little bit better through those things, that's cool. I also felt like, man, I really feel privileged, to be this guy that, like, my whole life I've been able to work at, make my passion my job, get to travel the world, play these cool gigs, now especially with Megadeth, it's like big gigs and we have nice conditions majority of the time. And wow, like I'm so lucky, and so I want to give back, and I want to use that, whatever this is, this fame or whatever you want to call it, to highlight some other things and to bring some attention and help people make the world better, because in the end we only have one, we only have this planet. There's not really any concrete hope of going anywhere else and making that work. There's just way too many obstacles in the way for us to go into space, so this whole dream of like, yeah, we'll just find another habitable planet and travel there for like 10,000 years and somehow make that work. It's like, yeah, no, I don't see that happening anytime soon, and the threat that our planet is facing is real. So anything we can do, it's simple. Like with Savage Lands, what we say, like, people don't realize this, but $10 you can plant a tree. $10, that's it. Then, of course, the tree needs to be the first year when it's growing and stuff. It needs to be watered and it needs to be taken care of. But that's all, like, we handle that stuff. So it's really $10. That's what it takes. And so even people who don't have much money are like, I can't make much of a donation. I can make $10 donation. Well, that's a tree. That's going to become part of a forest. That's going to become part of, like, wow, this land is necessary. We need that for, to keep our atmosphere clean. We need that to keep our biodiversity active. Everything is interlinked, as we know more and more through science. So, it's just small things can make a big difference. And that's one of the things that I really want to bring out, a message I want to bring out to people. If you feel hopeless and like there's nothing you can contribute, just do a little thing and it'll make a difference. And maybe you'll learn something, and maybe you'll get interested in some of these issues, and maybe you'll come up with your own project, or maybe you'll be like, hey, look, in my neighborhood I could do this. Who knows? It's just more about a frame of mind where, you can't sit around and just be depressed about the state of the world and wait for it to change, because you can be part of the solution, to say it in a cliche but very true way.
And maybe a small change, but small is better than none.
Absolutely.
Now, you've changed yourself around a bit. I mean, how long have you been vegetarian or vegan? Like, you've changed your health like immensely. And then now you, like, I also see like your health, you're very plant-based diet nowadays. And also see like you're just getting into martial arts.
Yeah. So we have a trainer with us, Dave's trainer, Reggie Almeida, who's a kind of a legend in the Brazilian jiu-jitsu scene. He comes with us. So I've taken a few lessons with him. It's not a continuous thing I do because, I have to be careful not to get damaged, and these guys are strong and big. I can easily end up being like, oh, it's going to be tough for me to play drums on this tour, But yeah, I stay fit. It's all part of, like, if you want to do this right, you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your body, of your mind. What I eat becomes part of that. For me, it's definitely an ideological thing to not, eat animal products as much as I possibly can. I call myself, like, if I could, name it away, I call myself a practical vegan. I'm not like hardcore in the sense that I'm going to have a temper tantrum if one day, we're in some country and it's kind of difficult to get something, that's fully vegan. I won't eat meat though, like meat or fish, like I never eat that. But sometimes, dairy, it's still really hard to do without it. But for the most part, like whenever I can, I don't eat that stuff. And, I think it's understandable that a lot of people don't want to go down that path. And and they don't have to. The truth is, like, if everybody was vegetarian or vegan one day a week, it would make a huge difference for the world, and so it's not a black or white thing. If you're somewhat interested in this, or you've had times where you maybe tasted a plant-based burger and you're like, oh, this actually isn't bad, this actually works. Well, maybe you should consider doing that occasionally, and because the animal agriculture, on top of being horrible towards the animals and depriving them of any of their natural instincts and life, and basically treating them like objects, which I'm fully against, and I hate all that stuff. The other problem is that it's also extremely polluting and a big contributor to our carbon emissions, and just not a very smart way of moving forward as the planet becomes more and more populated. It's not really sustainable in the long run. So if countries like China and India are going to start, producing the way we do, which they are, it's really going to become a problem, because there's just not enough space on planet to put all those pigs and cows. And even if you cram them into these tiny cages, which they do, or they can't even turn around or anything. So anyway, it's you can talk about that for hours, but my thing is kind of like, it's totally easy for me to eat this way. It's not a problem at all, especially where I live in Los Angeles. It's super easy. I know there's places on earth where it would be difficult to make it work, but again, do what you can do what you feel. You don't have to do what I do, but think about what it is that you care about, and what it is that you can do to maybe make your life better and make the life of others around you a little bit better. The way I look at it, like, my vision is that we all inhabit this planet, and if you love a dog, if you have a dog or a cat and you love them, you have to realize at some point that, like, a pig and a cow are no different, just because they've been categorized since we were young as like, oh, those are food. Those we don't care about. Like, they just go in, they just live in pens, and then they go to slaughter. It's like, you do realize that if you hung out with a pig, you'd realize that they're like a dog. Basically, they just look different, and they have different habits, of course, than a dog, but they're no less a sentient being who wants to run around and play and have babies and have fun and enjoy their life, and just be and be happy, and we take that away from them massively, like billions every year. So why? Sure, for a time it made sense that people had to eat meat because there was nothing else and that had to be done. But nowadays we know better, and we have other options. So there is ways to at least reduce it, in your life, and to be a bit more maybe caring about the other species. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Like, I get that. It's like, I've heard that, like, yeah, just one day a week, just don't eat meat. It's like, yeah, that's not hard. I've had partners.
Doable. Yeah, doable for most people.
Yeah, I've had partners that, like, they have like gluten allergies, so I've eaten a lot of different styles of food, and it's like, no matter who I'm hanging out with, I can eat. I'm like, what do we got? Cool, I'll find something here I'll like. Certain things I enjoy more than regular versions, and it's like, all right. Unfortunately, sometimes the healthier foods are more money, so it's like certain things I'll pony up a little extra for certain things, just because I just like it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll pay the tax.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I mean, everybody will find their own path, and I'll be the last person to tell someone else what they should eat and shouldn't eat. But again, I just, since you asked about it, that's kind of my personal philosophy. That's what I've come to. And remember, I used to be a guy who for 30 years I ate meat like every meal, because I grew up in Europe. It's staple, It's like you eat meat, like even at breakfast, like that's what happens.
Yes.
It's not a meal if there's no meat,
Yeah, I was in Oslo once for Tons of Rock, and the hotel breakfast buffet was a lot of like, oh, we're having meat now. It's like, this is. Yeah. I was like, this is a different type of breakfast here.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So it's just like, we'll wrap this up with a little quick track by track breakdown of the record, if you got the time for it.
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right. Cool. So first up is the title track, "The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead."
Yeah. So Dave had this concept about the Black Plague. It was actually one of the early lyrical concepts that he had, that he talked to us about when we were working on the initial album ideas. And the song, he wrote the song, basically it's he had a few different riffs there that went well together, and we kind of fleshed that one out as a band. But he had a very clear vision of where he wanted that song to go, and that was one of the earlier ones that we kind of had a semi-complete version of. I think it's a great opening track. It's got all the trademark Megadeth sounds. It's got a nice heavy part at the end. It's a very fun song.
Right on. Next up, we have Life in Hell.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about
Yeah.
that one. Pretty much, to sum it up, it's like how I would hear old school Megadeth. Thrash at the beginning of thrash when it wasn't quite a scene yet, but it was like this new and exciting music. That's the feeling I was trying to go for when I made the demo for that.
You could stick this song and toss it back in the time machine, and it would fit right in 1986.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I forget which one. This side note, I forget which one it is, but I did like the fact that I forgot which song it is right this second, but I got to hear like, oh, you did a modified Dirk blast in one of the songs, and I was like, he got it in there. I was like, it's not 90, it's not 300 beats a minute, but we got it in there. And it sounds a lot cool. That little weird paradiddle thing you do, and it's like, man, it's like, I know it's simple.
I think I know what you're talking about, and that's actually a fill that Gar Samuelson used to do. He did that on a few of the songs. Like there's one in The Conjuring. He uses it. I think it's in Mechanics. So it sounds kind of like a Dirk blast, but it's not. It's more like a fill between the kick and snare and then the crashes. And so yeah, that was cool. It just fit with that riff so well. So I was like, oh, that's a good way to honor Gar's work on Megadeth and his legacy.
Yeah, you do a damn good job honoring everybody's legacy. Gar, Chuck, Nick, everybody, Jimmy, and even was it Vinny Colaiuta did that one record too. So now if pressure was your thing, you'd be like a little crying in the corner with all that, like, oh, I gotta live up to all these guys, I gotta honor these guys' legacies and then put your own on top of it. It's right. It's like, no pressure.
My mind, I won't lie, but at the end of the day, you can only be you, so I just gave it my best shot, man.
Yeah. My thing is, there's so many people in the world that say why. It's like, you just got to say why not. It's like, you could not have done this, and this record could be with somebody else, but now here you are in Megadeth, and it's like, it's really nice to see your ascendancy in the spotlight of drummers, and just like, it's really good for me because I've known you for a while, so it's like, I always root for my friends, and it's like, even though I don't see you as much as I would like, it's still great that you're able to, like, oh, look, that's like, I know that guy. He's a good guy. And like, you've always been nice. You've never not once been like, I don't know anybody who can say anything bad about you. I'm sure there are, but I haven't met them yet.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Let's see. We talked a little bit already about Night Stalkers. We did that one already. Yeah. So Dogs of Chernobyl.
Yeah. Again, one that Dave had the lyrical concept for. The song itself was based on, the beginning of the song was the first part we had, like basically the verse chorus part. I'm not talking about the intro because that's something that was built later. Dave wanted to have this really epic intro, so I think that's something Kiko came up with, the acoustic part, and then we fleshed that out with the cymbal and guitar hits. But it's cool with that song because it has the atypical structure where it kind of evolves from the intro to the verse chorus section, which is this heavy mid-tempo part. And then in the end, like you mentioned, it goes into this crazy double bass part that goes on for quite a while. And it's fun, those songs with atypical structures I like, because they tell a story and they take you places. You don't exactly know what's coming next, especially the first times you hear it. You're like, oh, wow, like, look at this, So that's cool because I think that's always been part of Megadeth, and so that's one of those songs that has that, Holy Wars kind of approach.
Yeah, it has also, it's like, the chorus is just beautiful. That's someone like Dave, he just sounds, I don't want to say like ethereal, but it just has this nice wave of just like the flow of the words and everything. It just sings, and I'm like, damn, that was like, for a song that's kind of not, it's the unhappy accident of the way the world is now. It's like, wow, this song gets a little, to me, it sticks out a little bit more just because of the world right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
Up next is Sacrifice. Not the Canadian band, but Sacrifice.
Yeah. So that's another mainly Dave written song, and I believe that's kind of his modern day answer to The Conjuring, from what I understand. Which The Conjuring, by the way, was a song that, for those who know or don't know, like, he didn't want to play that song live for a long time, and then we started playing it again a few years ago because it's just such a great song. And he decided, you know what, like whatever the lyrics are, like it's still a good song and it deserves to be heard, you know. So this is kind of his modern day answer about, you know, black magic, and it's more from the positive side this time, whereas The Conjuring was kind of a dark energy kind of thing. So Sacrifice is a bit more light-hearted, you know, and that's kind of where Dave's head is at these days. So I guess that makes more sense, you know. And it's a mid-tempo song, but it has a lot of energy. I think it has a cool drive to it and some very cool accents and parts. And yeah, I like it a lot.
So it's the unofficial Conjuring Part 2.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna have to go listen to them back to back and see what I get from that.
All right.
Let's see. Next up is Junkie.
Junkie. Yes, that one used to be called Gran Torino. That was the working title. It had this driving your car through the desert kind of vibe, which, you know, Dave has done his fair share of driving songs, like 502 stands out. You know, that's a fun song, which I hope we'll play live one day. I love that song. But yeah, so it had that kind of just a very driving riff, you know, and that song was all about kind of maintaining that drive and giving it that feeling of like you got your window open and you're just cruising, and you know something crazy is about to happen, you know, something's about to go down. So ended up being, you know, the lyrical subject ended up being something different, but it's also one of the early songs that early on in the writing process we kind of got that together because we just felt really good about those main riffs. And so a lot of work was done that I recall of really all the little details in the song. In the beginning, it was more stuff repeated. And that's actually one maybe interesting thing I can say about the writing process, that sometimes you start with something that might seem a bit basic, but then Dave is already thinking in his head about like how he can make these subtle changes in the riffs and in the parts that in the end it doesn't feel monotonous at all. There's a lot of different things happening and it becomes a story, a voyage. So that's really cool. That's one thing I've learned from him, you know, as an arranger and a composer, that he really does have his way with that, and he has a vision, and his vision is solid. You know, like if he believes in something, even if you don't really see it right away, usually the man is right.
Can't argue with that one, man. It's like, and especially for you, it's like just in that sense, it's like, yeah, you get to play with Dave Mustaine. You know, who's Dave Mustaine. And then it's like you've also played with everybody from Peter Witchers to Devin Townsend and everybody in between. You alone have such a knowledge of different guitar players and styles and just different work. Oh, they work this way. I know how to make this. I know how to get the best out of this player, and I know what he likes and this and that. And like it must, I guess, when you do your own things, it must show. You know, you just like stick it all together, and it's like, all right, here's my bass ability, and here's everything I've got from my friends and teachers / influences.
Yeah, exactly. I've been very fortunate, man. Again, like I can't stress that enough, you know, to have had the chance to play with these amazing people. You mentioned a few, you know, there's been many others. I did some jamming with Frederick Thorndahl from Meshuggah.
Yes,
you know.
He did his record.
Yeah, Jeff Loomis, you know, I mean, Warrell Dane. I mean, there's been so many people, you know. I did a couple of songs with Danzig, Satyricon, At the Gates, Testament. Those are bands I've played live with, you know. I mean, it's incredible. Like when I look at it, I'm like, man, if I was like 16 years old listening to all these bands, like if somebody would have told me you're going to play with these guys and those and you're going to record with them, and like I'd be like, you're insane, you know, like that's not possible. Like, what are you talking about? Get off the drugs, you know. And the fact that I'm here and I've done all that stuff, and all those people have been, every single one of them has been cool to me and welcoming, and you know, they're all friends, you know, like to some degree. Like some I stay in touch with more than others, but yeah, I've been able to learn so much, and I think it's all culminated in this now. And so to be able to take all that experience and kind of let that inform my journey with Megadeth is really a blessing, you know. And I'm aware of that every single day. That's why I don't really have any bad days, you know. Like sure, some days are, you know, it can be a little bit tough being on the road and stuff sometimes, but I'm like, man, I realize fully everything you said. Like, can you believe like you get to do all this stuff? Come on, man, that's a dream, you know.
Yeah. What song did you do with Danzig?
I did a song on his latest album. I'm trying to remember the title of it, but yeah, I recorded two, and the other one, I don't know what happened with that. I think that's maybe he's keeping that or not for a different album. But you know, yeah, there are a few different drummers on his latest album. The album was called Black Laden Crown.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know you were on that one.
One of them I played on. Yeah, it was kind of a last minute like session thing where it's like, hey, can you come in this afternoon and lay down some drums? Like, sure, yeah, we got to hang out with Danzig, and it was really cool.
That was a good record. He plays drums too on that record. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. He usually does,
yeah,
right? He's like,
that's
yeah,
wild. It's like
yeah,
that's impressive. I was like, man, this guy, that's another legendary cat. And you
yeah,
got
for
to
sure,
you're
for
just
sure.
like you're just checking off the bucket list. I say, I got to play with this guy, I got to work with him. It's like there's
Yeah.
nobody left for you. Who's left for you to want to play with?
Oh man, I'm sure there's plenty. I love so many bands, But yeah, it's just it kind of what happens when you're when you do session work and people start to know you for that and start to know that you come in and if they need you, you can do something that works. I think that's a big part of it. Just kind of started happening with me, and now I'm so comfortable in the studio that even if it's kind of a last minute or a stressful situation, I'm confident in my capabilities. It can be tough sometimes. It's not always easy to get to the end result, and sometimes it's a bit of a struggle. But I like that. It's exciting. Like I did a record with Tony McAlpine a few years ago, and that really pushed my limits as to what I could play because he's very advanced, and there's a lot of course, it's metal, but there's a lot of like influences,
Froggy.
jazz and fusion and
Yeah.
prog, and it was just, and he was pushing me. He was like, "This is good, but you can do better." Like that's the Subaru. Give me the Mercedes. Like jokingly. But it's cool. I love that because it's a challenge, and that's how you get better as a musician.
Next up, we have is psychopathy. Psychopathy.
Yes.
Did I say it right?
Yeah, psychopathy. I don't know.
Psychopathy.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll call it.
that is basically the intro to Killing Time. So when we wrote it, it was all part of one thing, and then because Dave has this spoken word part, it became a separate track. But it's basically an intro, has a tribal drum feel and kind of builds up to the song, which is a song that was mostly written by Kiko, if I remember Killing Time. So that's a bunch of riffs and a song structure that he kind of came up with, and that we again as a band kind of fleshed out together. And some really cool ideas came into place, like in the end of the song, in the very last riff, that's kind of a long solo-y section that goes on. Dave came up with this really cool count thing that happens in there. There's like there's like 6 accents, 5, 4, 3, and that rotates.
Oh, that kind
Like
of thing,
it's
yeah.
counting that happens, and it's kind of subtle, but if you notice it on the guitar and on the drums, you'll be like, oh, that's like, again, Dave had this cool vision, and we made it happen. And it's fun.
Yeah, I've only known one other group to do something like that was Dream Theater. They had that one song where they had that 5 thing, then they do it again down to 1, and then they bring it back up, back up to 5, and I was like, wow, that's. Yeah. And I remember he counted it. Like I remember Portnoy counted it out, and it was like, look, yeah, I'll just show you how it is. Here it is on the chart. I was like, oh, okay, and it like made so much sense when you actually just point it out, and I was like, wow, that's insane.
Yeah, it's I always say it's called playing music for a reason. You got to be playful with it and bring in like some fun elements. So when Dave came up with that idea, I was super excited about it. I thought it was super cool. Yeah.
So I guess that this counts for Killing Time too. We'll just merge that one together. So now we have Soldier On.
Soldier On, yeah. That's a very like a triplet feel song. It kind of reminds me of Lying Estate on the previous album. It has this kind of militaristic feel, but again, Soldier On, actually the lyrics are not about war or anything like that. It's about walking away from a relationship when it's better, that you can better serve this person than yourself by not being with them. And as heartbreaking as that is, and as tough as that is, you gotta get over that, and you gotta carry on. I think we've all known people or been through situations like that. Dave certainly has, and so that's what he drew upon. And of course, he plays into the whole military thing with the title and with like the ending chants.
Oh yeah, like the little marching, like you just feel like you can see them. You can see you guys marching with backpacks on.
Exactly.
It's like I don't got a woman, but I got long hair. I was like, that's hilarious.
So good, right? Yeah, that's another one of those humorous things. And very, very Dave, very Megadeth. There's always been this kind of sarcastic side, or whatever you want to call it, to his lyrics. But I think that's cool. I think it's cool to have different facets, and people can focus on whichever one they want. If you want to hear it as this like go to war song, it certainly has that. And I've read quite a few comments already from people who serve in the military or who are out on duty, who that song has helped them, to get motivated and to carry on, because they live a very difficult life, with what they do. And so to be able to, bring something positive to them, even if it's through that kind of energy, like you got to carry on and do what you're there to do, that's cool too. I think set aside personal opinions about armed conflicts and stuff like that. It's unfortunately a reality of our world. And Dave has always had a lot of respect for, the people that help make our country safe, and as a matter of fact, make a quick detour back to Night Stalkers, which is about 160th Division. These guys that fly helicopters and do like covert missions. We had a guy, John Clement, who's a friend of the band and who was actually a helicopter pilot like that for many years. And he contributed some to the lyrics and to that song and to the imagery behind it. So it's a recurring theme, of course, in Megadeth, but it's for a good reason. It's not just because for whatever bravado or something. It's because they've really, and we all do have a real respect for the people who unfortunately have to go do those difficult jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta support your troops. Sometimes good times and bad times. It's like
exactly.
And I wish we did a better. I just wish that this country did a better job of taking care of them when they get back.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, it would be so easy, like in theory, just like, hey, you know what? You're in the military, you're serving overseas. They should have like mandatory like therapy sessions. They should have therapy sessions like anybody, any job where your life is in danger, that like a police person or military, it's like you need like therapy because like at the end of the day you want to go home, but you don't want, it's like, hey, my buddy's here. I'd rather go home than my buddy, but it's like that's a lot of emotions that people just turns bad. And it's like the way if I see one more like homeless vet sign walking around New York City, it just, and you just go anywhere across the country, you just wait long enough, you'll see like a homeless vet sign somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's terrible, man. I mean, those people have to deal with some of the worst things imaginable, and unfortunately there's no easy fix to that, but certainly I think always more can be done, and especially as mental health is becoming finally more recognized and more central as something that needs to be addressed, and that there needs to be more infrastructure in place for. I think that's definitely a big part of it, is our vets need to be, considered as like they do some of the hardest jobs that you can do, and they have to go through some of the most heartbreaking and terrible and life-changing things, if they're lucky to actually come back in one piece, which some of them don't come back, some of them come back, scarred forever or mutilated. And it's like, I know there are things in place for those people, but I certainly know that, like you said, there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made, I think, for mental health as a whole. But I do think that I do feel like as a country and as a civilization, in general, we're starting to realize that, and that there's starting to be more awareness and more acceptance of the fact that there's not just physical illness, there's mental illness, and that can take a lot of different shapes and forms. And, some of the things we see, like with the mass shootings, but also just people in private who have a struggle with life, or and end up maybe killing themselves or just living in misery. And there's a lot to be done there, for sure.
Yeah, we all know people that aren't here by their own choices anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, big shout out to Dr. Dave.
Yes, sir.
We'll come back around to Celebutant.
Yes. So we talked about that a little bit. That's a very, I would say, new wave of British heavy metal, Motorhead influenced track with a lot of the typical Megadeth flourishes too, but definitely goes back to the early records, has a kind of palpable energy to it, and a vivacity, or is that how you say it? Like a liveliness, that I really like, and it kind of builds throughout the song and just goes to this crazy finale in the end. And I really like that song. I have fond memories of how that came together and how we were jamming on it and just kind of excited about it. So it's a cool song. Kind of stands apart on the album, I think.
Coming up next is Mission to Mars.
Mission to Mars. Now that's a very different song, isn't it? Yeah. Some people hate it, some people love it. I think it's cool. It's a song that, again, Dave had this vision for. It's one of his early lyrical subjects that he wanted to do, and the riff is a little bit different from, especially the whole beginning part of the song is a little bit different from some of the other Megadeth stuff. But I think that's cool too, because an album, again, needs to be a bit of a roller coaster. It needs to tell a story if you want it to stay interesting and you don't want it to become monotonous or like, okay, I've heard this already like 5 times on the record, skip forward. You have to have some different things in there. And I think that's a song that definitely stands on its own as that, has a different vibe, has a lot of funny humor in it. Some going back to the Rust in Peace with that quote about, let's go back to Earth and let it rest in peace. And then the whole story is very interesting too, because it's actually about, people going to Mars as an escape and then realizing that, wait, this has happened before. Like there's already an old base here and people actually escaped to Earth. So it's a really cool, like crazy story that he came up with, which I thought was really smart, where I was like, wow, that's brilliant. It's like takes it a step further to like, wait, maybe we came from Mars. And of course it's a fictional story, but it's really cool to kind of have that kind of thing on the record, and for Dave to still have those ideas. They just seem endless. I remember he was a little bit daunted with having to write lyrics for all these songs on the new record, but in the end, he came up with so much cool stuff. There's nothing to be worried about.
I feel a lot of people don't pay much attention to sequencing, like record sequencing. It's like a good record for me. I feel it should have like a wave. It should have that wave. It's like, because if it's too much, like you said, if it's like 5 songs that are just like intense, and it's like, all right, you gotta have a wave, because your ears get tired after a while. No matter how good the record is, your ears are going to get tired if you give it the same thing for too long. So like a nice, here's some fast, here's some slow, here's some weird stuff. Like just keep it a wave, and it just keeps it more exciting.
Exactly,
a lot of metal bands seem to like not get that.
Right. Yeah, it's always been kind of a problem, but I think also as you get older, maybe you have more of an appreciation for the different facets. I remember I went through a time when I was young when if it wasn't fast and intense, I wouldn't have anything to do with it. But that luckily didn't last for too long. And I always grew up with different kinds of music as I was saying, hip hop. There was also pop music, classical, whatever, all kinds of different things, electronic. So, but yeah, it's the sequencing is important, and in this day and age of streaming, where people sometimes just listen to separate songs and that's it, that can get lost. I think in metal there's still a real appreciation for an album, for a side A and a side B, if you like the vinyl. So that was, part of why the songs that are on the album are on the album and the ones that are not aren't. And it all needed to make sense. And I think Dave really has a good sense of that too, and a good appreciation. And he's spent a lot of time and care on that part. Like once the songs were mixed and ready, which one is going to go where? How is it going to make sense? And that's cool, because it's this attention to detail. In the end, it makes a difference. You could just be like, yeah, just whatever. The beginning song is this, and then after that, just throw them on there. Like, no, he doesn't do it that way.
Yeah. And in your guys' case with the new record, side A, B, C, and D, double vinyl, and you double vinyl guys. That's a beautiful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, my partner Keith. Cool. Yeah, my partner Keith has the vinyl, and I saw him earlier. I saw him for his birthday earlier this month, and he's like, "Yeah, he got the vinyl in the mail," and it was like, "Wow, like this is pretty."
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah,
I'm stoked about it.
And finally, we'll be back.
We'll be back. Yes. The first single and a statement, right? We'll be back. Like it's like there's more coming, which we've all already talked about how the next album shouldn't take 6 years. That wasn't intended to take that long. But yeah, again, another old school ripper, man. I think that one really embodies kind of, what Megadeth is about. Again, it's like an evolving structure where the second half of the song is different from the first half, but it's just thrash. It's just very, very thrash. It has that feeling from back in the day, but again, with a modern twist to it. Again, it's like one of those songs that takes me back to the time when like what would I want to hear as a fan from He Sells and Killing Is My Business, and from those records, what would I want to hear do Megadeth do today? It would be a song like We'll Be Back, Life in Hell, Night Stalkers to some extent. So I think that's cool, and the fact that was chosen as the first single and the first video, the first of the trilogy of videos, that's really made me happy. The video, by the way, is also something, or the trilogy is something that we spent a lot of time to, that Dave really wanted to give the fans something of the level of the band, not some lyric videos or whatever, some stuff that's quickly thrown together. He really wanted to make an epic thing, the story of the genesis of Vic Rattlehead, which is still carrying on, because we did the video for We'll Be Back, Night Stalkers, and the title track, and there's going to be another couple of videos, or maybe even 3 coming next. So the story is still ongoing. But I thought that was really cool, because there's a whole new generation of people that are discovering Megadeth these past years. And even though the story of Vic Rattlehead was kind of told in The Skull Beneath the Skin on the first album, it's a good time to retell it with the modern production. And and everything we can do nowadays. And I think the videos, for those who haven't checked them out, you should really take a look. They're really cool. Our good friend and partner Rafael Pensado, who's also part of our crew, he helped like make those videos. He stars in them and helped make them, produce them together with Leo Liberty, who's done a few more videos for us in the past. And Dave funded all that stuff from his own pocket because he just didn't want there to be any label interference or anything like that. He really just wanted to give the fans the best thing we could. And I think again that's speaks a lot to how much he cares. How much he cares about the fans, the band, just in general. And then when you see the record sales numbers, it works because we're one of the few bands that we sold a similar amount to Dystopia, for example, in the US. In the meantime, the rock market has gone down over 20%. So to sell the same as you did back then, you would be 20% down. But we actually stayed at the same number, which means technically, you could say we went up. But people have really embraced the record, and I think they got really excited when We'll Be Back came out, and they realized, wow, Megadeth is not slowing down.
Yeah, and I also do enjoy the fact that the band is, it's like, hey, to me, it's like you're my first band. Megadeth is my first metal band, so it's like they're always going to be up here for me. Like no matter what happens, always be up here for me. But I do like the fact that Megadeth still like, yeah, we'll go out on tour with Five Finger Death Punch. We'll be the, we'll open. It's like some bands are like, no, we should be. Who do you think we are to open? No, you open for us. It's like you guys will fit in where you get in, and you play some very weird, I would say more European style shows and tours. Because like here, like America, it's like, oh, metal band, and like you played shows that weren't all metal bands.
Right. Yeah, sometimes you just got to take the opportunities that present themselves. And we really wanted to be on the road when the record came out, And so that tour, we had already toured with them just before the pandemic, as I mentioned, and we knew it went well and it went over well in Europe. And we figured, why not do it here? Sure, like it would be cool to do a headlining tour, but it's also really good to bring new people in and maybe their fans who don't know Megadeth or who barely know Megadeth. This is the time where they can be like, wow, this band is cool. And we are getting a lot of those reactions. We're getting a lot of people who are like, man, I didn't know Megadeth. You guys are amazing, And that's important too, winning over new people, getting new people into the, into the fan base or however you want to call it. At the end of the day, it's about that. If you go on tour, you just play for all the people who already know you. I mean, that's cool. Of course, we want them to see us too, but
you're not growing.
We're gonna tour a lot, man. We'll be back for those who didn't want to come, like the song says, right? For those who didn't want to come to this tour because we're only playing an hour set or because they're not Five Finger fans or whatever, we're gonna do more tours. So we're gonna be on the road for quite a while.
And like tying that up, Dave is like, yeah, Dave's 61, and like I just like the fact that a man of his age. It's like, oh, people like, I remember you're like, oh man, I'm 40. It's like, I'm too old for metal. Like, this is too hard. And it just shows that, if you basically try to take care of yourself, you can keep pushing it until the wheels fall off.
Yeah,
and it's impressive. It's inspiring to see like a metal musician, especially a guitar player. Normally you see like the drummers are like, sadly, sometimes the drummers are the first ones to like step down.
Yeah.
But to see like someone, he's still playing just as good as I remember seeing him in 1995. So it's like, oh, like that's the same guy playing guitar now. It's like maybe different guitar, but it's the same. It's the same. It doesn't. There's no sonic loss in my ears.
Yeah. No, it's super impressive, man. It's what he is. Like let's be honest. Like he has his family, and that's super important in his life, of course. But Megadeth has been his life since the beginning, and I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't think he has any intention to end it before it's time to end it. As long as he can put on a good show and give people what they would expect from us, then we're going to be out there doing it. And I hope we can do at least one more album, maybe two more. Who knows? There's a lot of talk about a lot of different things we want to do, so that's exciting. It's still very much vibrant and alive, and looking towards the future.
Yeah, you deserve at least two more records. At least two more records.
Thank you.
I was like, I do wish that I do remember talking about Vic Rattlehead and the origin. It's like I remember the comic book, and like, I remember in the '90s they also made like a Megadeth comic book, like based like tales of, was it Cryptic Writing Tales or something? I forgot what it was called. And they just like, oh, here's songs based on the lyrics. Do you know, is there a chance of something like that coming back? Because like I know comic books seem to be all the rage now with bands making comic books based on their songs or based on their own stories, you know?
Right.
Is there a chance
Yeah,
for
it's very
more?
possible. I know they did a bunch for, they did this box set a couple of years ago that had a lot of comic books based or comic stories based off of some of the lyrics, you know. I forget what that was called, but it was the Warheads on Foreheads, maybe.
Okay.
It was called. It was a compilation that came with, the limited edition came with a big comic book. I believe that was the one. If I'm wrong, correct me. Um, but yeah, we're always looking at things like that. We're always looking at different things. We're looking at video games. We're obviously the videos together are going to form kind of a short movie. So that's something we might do some stuff with. And if anything else like that comes up, any cool collaborations, we're always looking at that. So we're always brainstorming ideas. That's another thing where Dave has really instilled that spirit in me, where it's like, hey, maybe we could work with these guys. Like I recently came up with an idea, which I won't talk about yet, but if it materializes, it'll be a cool little thing. So, like you just start realizing that Megadeth is such a ubiquitous brand, like people all across the world, especially in the US, but across the world know it. And so a lot of people are willing to be like, yeah, we could partner up and make something cool for the fans, something special that you wouldn't otherwise find. So that's always in the back of our minds, and we're always brainstorming things. So keep an eye out.
Cool, man. I gotta say, Dirk, thank you. Oh, I appreciate you for taking this time to chat with me, man. It really means a lot. I thank you for enjoying part of your day off and just letting me pick your brain about a bunch of stuff.
Man, it's been a pleasure, Omar. You're such a great guy, and this was such a fun interview, and it was truly a pleasure speaking with you.
Well, thank you, man. I got just want to wrap it up with these last two things. You and Hannah are still doing your Gimme Metal shows?
So it's kind of on hold right now because I'm on tour, but it's not gone. So whenever we do have time, which hopefully at the end of the year we'll have time to put together some episodes. We love doing that show, so you can expect more. It's called, for those who don't know, it's called Hannah and Dirk's Extreme Blast. It's on Gimme Metal, which you can listen to for free online. You can download the app or go to the website, sign up. All it takes is your email. You won't get bombarded with crazy spam, so you can just go and listen, and there's a lot of cool shows on there. Dave has a show on there too. We like to, Hannah has a lot of cool musical influences that are different from mine, so we present a pretty eclectic show, but still a lot of mostly metal based, so a lot of heavy stuff.
Yeah, and I gotta say, that photo you guys chose, I just love that, like retro looking, like neon. It just feels like, I feel like I should be listening. It feels like so synth wavy looking metalness. Yeah. And I just love that photo. I was like, that photo is just brilliant. Like she's a genius.
She is, like, man. She has the best ideas. Whenever she goes like, hey, I want to do a photo shoot, like, let's, I'm always like, sign me up, because I know it's going to be some crazy stuff she comes up with, and she always makes it work too. Like, we've done quite a few now, I've been married for, it's going to be 16 years this year. So I've stood in, quite a few times, and she always comes up with amazing stuff. It's so cool to see how her brain works and how she manages to find like the look and the things that fit and that make it work in the end.
Yeah, I've met her a few times, and she's just wonderful. She's got like a great energy, and she does great work. And it's like, artistic stuff aside, she's just a great human being. And I'm glad I've had the pleasure of catching her out on tour a couple times, and just like getting to just shoot, just chat it up with her. She's good. Yeah. She's a good soul.
She is, man. She is. And by the way, like, the person to credit for, inspiring me to become eventually now vegan, that's her. So she grew up, just as an aside, she grew up becoming vegetarian at a time when that was not a thing, and basically everybody looked at you and was like, are you crazy? So she's been doing that for a really long time. And when I met her, and just by talking with her and seeing how she made it work and stuff, that inspired me. I was like, you know what? I think I can do that. And it fits with my life philosophy. I should have been doing this a long time ago. I just never, nobody ever inspired me or talked to me about that, and so she did. And she's been such a positive influence in my life in so many ways. I can't even begin. We'll have another 2-hour chat. But yeah, I love Hannah. She's the best.
We'll save that for your 20th anniversary. We'll make a little thing for her.
There you go. Exactly.
And I'm super happy for all your success and all your 86 other bands that it's like, oh yeah, I'm putting out this record over here. I'm putting out this, there's a Ben C record coming out there. Kill Division. It's like, you're just your schedule, like I'm scared to see what your Google Calendar looks like. It's like, how do you find time to fit every goddamn thing in there? That's
Listen, it's easy. Like basically, Megadeth is the priority. Everybody knows that. And if you're not okay with that, then find somebody else to work with. A lot of the people that I work with are friends, or people that they want to have me part of their project. In the case of NC, of course, it's my own thing that I do whenever I feel like it. But all those bands are more, they're more projects for me, in the sense that like they know how much time I can and cannot dedicate to that. My life is with Megadeth. That's where I am mostly. Everything else comes after that. It's like Megadeth, my family, and then the other bands. So in that sense, it's easy. I make that very clear, and people figure it out. Like, Cadaver has a cool touring drummer. Kill Division is doing, I think, a release show with a cool drummer that they're having fill in. And that's cool. Like, as long as that works for them, and if it doesn't, then I totally understand. It's always completely fine on that level. And all those people are friends, and there's a lot of downtime, like pandemic. I mean, we were pretty much home, all of us, for a year and a half, 2 years, and I had to pay the bills somehow and do work. So some of that was recording records and helping friends out with stuff, doing different recordings. That's what I do. That's what I'm good at. So I don't think that takes away any of my focus from the band, because luckily with the band, with Megadeth, we do have some downtime to refresh our brain. And for me, it's really good at that time to be drumming, to be working on music in some capacity, because it keeps me focused on that and keeps me in shape. So a lot of good things about it.
There you go. There you go. Words of wisdom by the schedule master, Dirk Verbeuren. Dude, thanks again, man. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you next time you're in New York.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
Yeah, gotta finally put some FaceTime. It's been a minute.
Yeah, we'll have to meet up and get some good food and good coffee or something.
Yeah, man. I'm sure we have a ton of vegan places around here. I'm sure I'll find one for you.
That sounds great, Omar. Thank you so much, man. Fun interview. I really appreciate it. Take care of yourself.